Hello, Chris. Can you hear me?
Yes, John, loud and clear. How's it going, man?
Very good. How's everything with you?
Oh man, busy times, busy times.
Yeah. I apologize. It took so long to pick you up. We've had internet problems here, so this is sort of the bane of going live. But so, uh, thank you so much for making the time to join us. This is great having you here, and uh, and congratulations on NDI 5 because that's there's a lot in this release.
That is very true. NDI 5 is uh it it's gonna be, I think it's the most feature dense a release is gonna be uh in the public viewpoint. NDI, as it's iterated over, I think it's over 6 years now. We constantly have these major releases that sort of lay the groundwork for lots of things. And I think for the first time, we've had a ton of success at Viz Group, both with the VizRT and NewTek brands, and now the NDI brand is also its own sort of piece of that. But we're really seeing people who have been using VizRT products, who've been using NewTek products, who are like, I have a good understanding of NDI, and everything they say about NDI 5 just is like, this is stuff I've been waiting for. This
Yep.
is maybe that final maturation of the total dream of interconnectivity.
Yeah, I mean, a lot. One of the things I thought was really interesting is a lot of the shift with the Viz equivalent of the TriCaster project, the Viz Vector and that family, is in part targeted at AWS and cloud deployments.
Yeah.
So having these capabilities now, sort of at a foundational level, is really critical to the success of the whole cloudification of the TriCaster and those streaming capabilities there.
The there's a lot that we can talk about with respect to the iterations on how things move and technology deploys, and we're talking about cloud stuff. um, as part of Viz Group, there has been a bigger push for, you guys still have me?
Yes, we do.
Okay. So there has been a huge push towards those clientele at the very top of the market who are looking at cloud-based infrastructures. On the blue side of this, NewTek, we are still all about getting a piece of hardware out to people because
Yep.
that is still a lot of realities. But as we make these iterations in NDI, it's all about making that, you know, what is the difference between purchasing cloud time and an on-premises cloud, right?
Yep.
Like if your TriCaster is so enabled that it's essentially an extension of your virtual workflow, then is it worthwhile for your smaller enterprise to maybe get involved with the cloud aspects? There's going to be a cost associated with that versus, hey, the price of the TriCaster, sort of that for my organization over the time, this just lives in a rack, but the capacity for us to work within a virtual environment is already there. And I think we sort of see that a lot with the customers, especially with TC2s, that the TC2 lives in an HQ somewhere,
Yep.
but 99% of its use cases are totally devoid of that physical space that it operates in. And so I think different customers are going to have different approaches. But while cloud is on the forefront of, technology nerds, I think those go across from one to another, and we're going to see lots of stuff like that where it is sensible applications in the newer version of NDI that can now be utilized in lots of different scenarios.
Yeah. So, I mean, we were just before you came on, we were talking about NDI bridge, and if let me just put up a diagram here, so you'll be able to see this as well. This is sort of the slice that we were talking about as how this would operate, where you are basically creating groups and you're advertising those groups to the bridge. When the bridges
Right.
connect, that group is advertised across to the joining bridge from the hosting bridge. Uh,
Right.
and so the messaging at that point is simply exactly the same things as you get with MDNS. Basically, it's the advertisement, but there's no video or audio. And then once somebody connects on the joining side, you actually are taking native NDI, wrapping it in a RUDP layer and transport and moving that across. So it's native NDI, albeit all the NDI bits are getting on a train and going to the other location. For
Yeah, that's yeah, totally the right concept. So I think this is going to be. I think for a lot of users, you're going to have to dig deeper into the access manager side of this, making your NDI groups,
yep,
because that's going to be your best path to success. And I say that strictly because bandwidth is always a factor. No one has unlimited bandwidth. There's not a single organization, whether it's the CBC in Canada, NBC in the United States, or any of these major groups that just has unlimited power to do this stuff. So making that NDI group that is specific to the signals you want to send across with your bridge is going to be essential. Um, a cool factor part of this is it will maintain the NDI setup it was initially presented in, which is to say, if I'm using HX2 or full bandwidth NDI setups on
yep,
my local side and I present those in the bridge, I can just have those go across in that same fashion. So this is actually not new in the NDI SDK world, but it is new from an application perspective.
yep,
In the 4 release, I want to say it was 4.5, we talked about doing software HX2. And that is sort of led to part of the new innovations with NDI5 is you can push an HX2 camera via bridge.
yep,
There is always a capacity to know bandwidth requirements, CPU, GPU. You're going to have to keep that all in mind as you build this stuff out. But bridge will push them along as they come in. Alternatively, you can have the bridge act as, hey, send these all via HX or send these all via full bandwidth NDI. So you do have those layers of granularity to really sort of pick and choose how you want this to transmit across. And as we're talking about RUDP, also part of bridge is the ability to reference some of the older generations of NDI. There's a lot in this tool that is both about doing that sort of over the WAN
yep,
connection, and some of it is about just how we're managing NDI packets. And so there's a lot of knobs and
yep,
things to tweak for higher level users. I think if you're an IT wizard and you're looking at hey, what can I do with NDI, you're now getting like a very hands-on approach to that, where previously some of that was really buried deep. Now with bridge, you can really access those features and really get some of that like next level production quality stuff that you've been looking for.
yeah. But I want to point out, because this is something that we've talked about, is that NDI bridge should be at this point considered a tool,
Yes,
not a
it is a
fully
tool.
baked product that could get like the whole support expectation people would have. So it's something that people should consider as they rethink some of the architectures they could use in their productions. But it isn't something they should necessarily say, hey, let's run out tomorrow and we're going to throw away everything we're using and jump on this as the next the next phase of our development.
Just with all tools, what's going to suit the right needs. And to your point, this is a tool. That's why it's part of this software development kit. The SDK is not, well, like on the Blue brand with NewTek, we consider like, here's a product. The TC2 is a fully fleshed out product
Yep.
that is using a whole bunch of innovations that have come before it in NDI. What we're looking at with NDI Bridge is the ability to augment some of those field setups, but it is a tool that you're going to have to sort of spend a little time. There's new documentation coming out along with this stuff that really starts to get people who want to take the time, right? There are guys who this is what is going to take that production next level. The NDI bridge is going to be the first step in that. And with all things with NDI, it's about developing the roadmap, right? Like now there's highway paved for us to start to approach this, whereas before there was a lot of third-party organizations. I think for some companies, still working with those third parties is going to be the move that makes sense tomorrow. But knowing that this is on the future, maybe you can start to see, hey, what can we maybe change in how we thought about it before, now that this thing is becoming available? What can we do in 9 months as this thing is, like, we're looking at bridge plus some systems? Maybe there's something cool that we can do.
Yeah, I mean, because this is the other thing. Unlike things like Studio Monitor, the bridge is meant to run on a real piece of hardware here. I mean,
Yeah.
it is not a lightweight. You know, so yeah, just spin 6 of these up because we want to see how it works.
You're talking about doing some level of encoding of full bandwidth NDI sources or HX sources, and a while ago we moved NDI heavily into the GPU.
Yep.
I think you're looking, like, this isn't going to be, you maybe have one computer in your production crew that you can like slap bridge on that'll do all this stuff today, but you're probably going to spec out to make sure that I can do, hey, you know what, I really need 4 signals to cross from my location in New York to my location in California. and that's going to be essential to my workflow. And those four signals are all I care about. I'm definitely not going to build a machine. I don't know if it's possible to build a machine that can take an entire large scale NDI ecosystem
Yep.
today and push it via bridge. It's just not there. But for those essential signals pathways that we're going to cross over the WAN, hey, we're going to build something that's got a decent core processor, a decent graphics card. And then there's also a conversation of like the reality of still the times we live in where like that stuff is also hard to find.
Yep.
So, this is going to be something that you're going to read into and then build your system for over the next couple of months to make it that cool linchpin to that new production.
But it's also beyond just sort of a tool. It's now becoming foundational to sort of the SDK and other pieces. So like NDI in the beginning, it's building the ecosystem around the wide area aspects of bridge and
Yeah.
sort of this foundation. So I think that's for some people that may be thinking about this, it's important to sort of understand the phase of this. And this is really like NDI when it first came out, it was an interesting tool. This bridge is
Yeah.
the same way, but as the ecosystem develops, it's going to become something where there'll be more native support for like running across these things and configuring them or building them in. I mean, I haven't had my hands on the API yet. So, but
Sure.
I'm definitely anticipating that there's a lot of good stuff sort of buried in there that will come out in third-party product as well.
Yeah, I think this is a good point to just understate. Like, this is pre-release. We're talking about NDI 5, and it's on the horizon,
Yeah.
and we're very excited. And in general, you look at the history of products, and you look at what we've done. We tend to let the NDI, the stuff we release for free, ends up being one of the most powerful pieces, but it is foundational, as you put it. Like, this is what we build the next suite of amazing products and tools, and interactivity points, and there's lots of different angles to attack on this. I
Yep.
think of something like what we're doing with the NDI audio aspect, changing, taking a new feat, taking an existing workflow. I think a lot of people work in IP audio with things like Dante and 867, and now we have the ability to say, hey, we can take an NDI audio feed and work with VST based platforms.
Yep.
That's a game changer if you were in that space. And now there's another facet to this where, my TC2 Elite has 32 sources into it.
Yep.
If I wanted to manage all that audio in a platform that could maybe handle that, that's, we're talking about on the higher scale of professional from the
Right.
audio IP standpoint. Now I can do that. And this is another factor of just like this growing ecosystem of just Viz Group and NDI is making all these cool new pathways in NDI 5
Right.
that are gonna make new workflows for tomorrow.
Well, I mean, VST and LV2. I mean, for all the Linux fans out there, you definitely and Audacity and things like that, which I think support LV2 and probably don't do VST3 yet. So that can be really powerful. But this actually opens the door now to not just sort of I bring an NDI feed with, but there's multi-channel audio inside of NDI feeds, which not everybody
Yeah.
appreciates. I mean, there's 16 channels of audio inside NDI. So getting
Right.
that into a DAW and being able to manipulate it as part of a signal chain, a digital signal chain, and output it out the other side is incredibly useful. And
Right.
so,
I can think of quite a few companies who are doing stuff with large scale. What last year's circumstances mean that everyone works in remote, and maybe you have a system that has a lot of remote callers, and the fact that the NDI ecosystem supports that is not like now there's a cool new thing that everyone can do in NDI. I represent NewTek, so I'm always going to talk about us first, but that NDI is that SDK is going to allow lots of other third parties to sort of delve deeper into these growing emergent production
yeah.
environments.
So we actually have a question from Shop
Sure.
BC. They're asking about NDI 5 and security. And they said since you have NDI KVM, and that's one of the supported
Yes.
protocol, which is phenomenal. But I can understand the security question that people would have around that. So we noticed in Bridge that it does have an encryption key. So I'm wondering if that component where you can input an encryption key is part and parcel to the overall security equation here?
So the uh, we're going to tackle the easy question, and then we'll just say with the NDI 5 on the encryption stuff, if they're involved in the SDK, I think that is something to dive deeper in.
Okay.
So that's the simple question. For the more complex answer of, hey, how's this going to work going forward? I think you got to look into, as the SDK comes forward, they're going to have to look into what's available, and that's just sort of me giving a simplified, like, there's no one purpose answer for what is going on from a security standpoint. Like, everyone's security needs in the IT space are going to be independent. So I can't just be like, hey, this is going to work for everything. Go NDI, it's going to do it for you. You got to do a little bit of research and work with your IT team to make sure this is going to be the pathway for you. As far as KVM is concerned,
Yep.
you do have the ability to lock KVM. Also, what we're starting to see is KVM as a feature set of the TriCasters and Windows environments is like half of the battle. The other half of the battle is getting that out across my network path. And that ends up being the real important part, which is my security layer is in how do I connect my home user to my local environment. That's where I care about the security. Locally, we can set up some logins and passwords and stuff like that, so access to the systems can be guarded. But in general, you want to get, once your users have access to it, you wanted to get them to the system as fast as possible. So the KVM feature is designed with some simple tools, but it is, typically we're talking about KVM, the local network. It is then the pathway that we go externally that we do our sort of, we sort of tackle that stuff.
But you're also going through NDI bridge. So somebody would have to be on the same network as NDI, as your NDI bridge that you've made that connection through. So this isn't like opening it to the world. I mean, I think we should be clear that it's a peer-to-peer relationship between an NDI bridge, maybe in a data center, and an NDI bridge in a studio. And when that connection is made, it's going through a specified IP and port. And you don't have like that necessarily as something that anybody outside of permissioned people with physical access, like network physical access to that NDI bridge box would be able to leverage. So I mean, I think
entirely, yeah, that's the right way to approach it. This is what I'm saying. Like, there's where the rubber meets the road of like your actual IT deployment. I think most people are going to be very happy with what's going on in Bridge in terms of like what you just said. Like, hey, there's this specific pathway. If we need to monitor it, our IT team can tackle that. Yeah. But is it going to work in every environment? The security questions are always at a deeper layer, and so hopefully this gives enough of a shine enough light on for the question giver that, hey, we can look into this at a different time. But I think once the SDK is out there, working with your IT team, there'll be more information that'll be relevant to your guys' needs.
But all the security that exists in an IT space can be applied in this space as well. So I think as a fundamental answer, you're not short-circuiting anything. You're not doing an end run around any security that normal IT would expect in these types of infrastructures.
Entirely.
So this is, there's a couple of questions that people are asking. One of them is, do you only need one side to have a advertised, like a forwarded port? So when somebody joins, do the connections go both ways? So you can see my NDI that I share, and I can see yours that you share, but you're only opening ports on one side? Or do you have to?
As far as I understand, bridges can operate in a one, send to receive model.
Yep.
Or one side will have the ports up, the other side can grab them, assuming they can access that data. I have not done crossover. I have seen remote connections coming into a system. So from my experience, I've seen it going one group going across a public internet to another group. So that's my current experience with it. I haven't done testing on the other side.
Yeah. So I mean, because that's one of the cool things is that you only need one port. Like for people that are used to SRT, which sort of plays in a similar space, you need one IP but separate ports for each SRT connection. Here, you open up one port, but it can have all the NDI connections that are being advertised traverse that single port. Because it's only, from what I understand, that's the way it's set up here. So, and I'm not putting you on the spot because I know there's a lot of like detailed questions here. So
I want to say there's going to be some of this that functions like traditional NDI, and so you may need to open up a port range. but this is a great question to follow back around. There's going to be, again, like Bridge is going to have probably a good chunk of data, because what we're doing, we're going to, the Bridge application one is going to sort of compress and aggregate all of the available NDI feeds in a given,
Yep.
group, and then it's going to push that over the network. And then the Bridge application two on the other side is going to sort of de-aggregate, and they can go both ways. So I'm just looking at a diagram right now that I had on my side.
Yep.
So it does look like there is capacity to do sort of two methods. So that would at least imply that needs to be two pathways for networking. But more information on this to come as it rolls out.
That's more than fair. This is incredibly detailed. So just Kevin McCardle just said, is NDI Bridge going to be an actual application in the NDI's tools download? So I would just, to paraphrase you, it will be a tool in the tools download. So we don't want to sort of conflate this as a fully baked application.
Yeah,
It's a tool.
when we push things into the tools, the actual tool setup. So I don't know the future for this.
Yep.
We're talking about Bridge very much in the as it's coming forward. I think if you recall, NDI 4.5, I want to say, or NDI 4 released the beta analysis tool.
Mm-hmm.
Like this was its own sort of like very very specific application that, like, if you were IT centric, you could recognize what's going on in a given NDI feed and sort of troubleshoot your network. I'm not sure if this will be part of the main tools package, which like people are familiar with, things like screen capture and webcam, these easy use things, or if it's going to be broken out. In which case, if it's broken out and it's in a beta state, it will identify that like that, and it'll sort of be in users' prerogative to get deeper knowledge into it.
Yep.
But if it's part of the actual tools download, it will be part of that listing. And so the NDI space is growing.
Yep.
And I think that has me excited. And if you're a user of NDI, that should have you excited as well, because Viz Group is sort of growing the NDI dedicated resources. And you're going to start to see that in a lot of ways, including the number of ways we're dropping these sort of usable NDI applications.
So, I mean, then let's quickly switch over to, I mean, there were two new tools that were announced that are, definitely in the sort of the general tools package. And, the first would be remote, NDI remote.
Yes.
Which, if, actually, let me see, because I'm going to, if you could pull up the slide here, this would be, so the way we looked at NDI remote when we set this up was that it's a WebRTC based link, so you're connecting from a remote browser, whether it's mobile or sort of desktop laptop based, and it's all driven out of Studio Monitor. So you're effectively getting a WebRT feed into Studio Monitor, and from there you can forward it as an NDI feed, record it, do all the things you do with any other native NDI feed that would be coming into Studio Monitor. So I just want to make sure that we're covering this correctly.
Yeah.
But
so yeah, I mean, you essentially have the basics of what remote's trying to do. I think it's as the space, the design of this is for like easy setup, right?
yep,
QR codes, whether or not your end user actually knows what they are. The idea is like you can scan a QR code with your phone, and then a link
Yep.
will pop up and you're good to go. So that's sort of the goals of remote, is how do we get easy connectivity and accessibility
yeah.
on a variety of devices.
And right
I
now
think
it's one direction. So
Yeah.
so because I mean I actually put something together here where we just sort of showed you use Studio Monitor, initiate, send the guest, like you said, a QR code or a link. They will see that, click on it, open the browser, and that will come into Studio Monitor. So as a pathway, it's dead simple for, but it's more like, and again, sort of to use the SRT model, it's that one directional model. It's like having SRT on a camera. I can bring audio, video in, but it's not really a whole framework for discussion back and forth yet. It's not sort of at that, though, I mean, that's probably, if I looked at a timeline, that's probably somewhere there, but this is where it is right now.
Sure. I believe the end result for remote is that it's gonna it's I think you're on the right sort of path in terms of like where we're trying to go with it. I want to say the last time I saw this, it was I saw a phone user use this within the last week. Pull up on their phone, grab the link, like literally as they were doing a demonstration for me live, have their phone on their network and sort of push the camera into the TriCaster. But I do no locally the user is going to see, the way the phone works is going to, the local user is going to see what the phone's driving to the endpoint, right?
Yep. So it's like a confidence monitor of yourself. So you sort of see
Right.
where you look. So I mean, that's. I think this is really interesting. But I know there's a lot of people that were so into, and we touched on it before, the audio direct and what you
Sure.
have going on with that. So the fact is, this now opens up the whole world of audio processing, sort of the Pro Tools, Audacity, anybody that's using any of those, this now, it pulls NDI into that world, in and out. So it's not just a one directional thing.
Yeah, the NDI audio tool is going to be. Uh, there's a lot of cool stuff that you can think about with it, but the
Yep.
short story is that to break out those feeds and say, hey, this is now an NDI audio path. How what I do with it is I just think of the immediate, like you look at what's available in the TC2 Elite, right? In the
Yep.
TC2 Elite, we give you ostensibly 15 faders, and the 16th faders is sort of dedicated to Live Call Connect of external to the TriCaster sources. And if you were in a very complex workflow where maybe you had 32 remote guests
Yep.
from a platform, even in the TriCaster's UI, that's a lot to manage. But we sort of do that engineering smartly, because at a certain point you need to bring the workflow into a larger scale tool.
Yep.
And working with the NDI audio into the VST world, those are the kind of tools that do this work. Those are the kind of tools that are better designed for handling massive amounts of audio. And the fact that it's just NDI audio means that there are lots of different wheelhouses that can play in. So I think that's sort of the idea is, like, I'm going to grow my workflow, at least in the NewTek side of the world. I'm growing my workflow to beyond what I'm presented. What should I use? And we're sort of pointing you in this direction of saying, well, with the VST stuff, we can take VST workflows. Here's this NDI audio feed, send that way, and then process your audio, bring that back into your production. And now you are able to operate at that higher level.
Yeah. And I mean, one of the other things that I think, when you think about how these are being crewed, you can't have one person sitting at a TriCaster with 18 screens. Yeah. And
Yeah.
when you're doing things that are more complex, and audio is a complex job, for anybody that's had to deal with it on the video side knows that's the part that usually turns around and bites you. Uh,
Especially at scale, right?
yeah, at
Like,
scale, absolutely.
as you start to add, you're already processing so many video feeds mentally, and now you're going to process all these audio feeds and have to EQ. Like, it just becomes a behemoth at a certain point. But recognizing that that's the way productions are going, right? The virtualized world is forever now. Like the
Yep.
at home, someone being a remote at home contributor is going to always be that case. And NDI Audio says, hey, we're going to help make this a little bit easier by getting you the ability, removing maybe some of the heavy lifting you might have been doing elsewise.
Yep.
Like, I'm sure there's a hardware approach to this that would be somewhat costly, and now it's just, here's the tool is there to now enable a new workflow for you guys.
Yeah, and it's really just the promise of NDI brought into the audio space. I mean, it's just that the ability to take anybody's tool and link them together and build a solution out of an array of tools, all talking a common language. So that's, I think, really fantastic. So I had one other question. Somebody came out, Jonathan Four just said, will Bridge handle the transcode from NDI to HX? And the answer is yes,
Yes.
and back. So and in saying this is a really important piece. For the first time now, we're really starting to look at NDI and NDI HX as both being in the software space, and not simply the sort of the hardware vendor space, where that was part of the embedded NDI toolkit. This is now making NDI HX appear, so potentially software developers may be able to use this in working on networks that have less scale, but still may need to
Yeah.
have 8 or 10 users, sort of being carried, video carried for different users.
Yeah, I mean, in NewTek and NDI and Viz Group, we always treat, we try to look at all NDIs the same, and where that has happened in the physical space
Yeah.
is in a variety of ideas. HX, and now we talk about the latest version of HX products, sort of starting with 2020. All of those HX products are part of HX2, and those things being that next sort of iteration on what's happening in the real world. HX products are very much consumer centric products. These are things that you could purchase. There's an HX app for your phone that'll turn your phone into an NDI source. And to your point, making that transition to software is a huge piece of this. And again, that has existed in the SDK,
Yep.
but for your mad scientists, those people who are really deep into digging out the NDI workflows and implementing it in their products. Now, Bridge being able to say, yeah, we'll turn all these sources into HX.
Yep.
You have 6 sources, we can push those in HX. Now, recognizing that, again, there are aspects of this that we're not digging too deep into, because once the thing is released, you have to recognize that, as we discussed earlier, it's about building the right. You're going to build a PC on each end to sort of handle this load.
Yep.
To do your sort of WAN connectivity, and then you're going to pass it over to whatever your NDI workflow is, whether that's TriCaster, Viz, or otherwise. There's going to have to be 2 machines, one on each side of the fence here, on each side of the network, and they'll sort of do the conversion for you.
Yeah, but when you combine this with the new support announced for ARM, the ARM processors, I mean, this has me really excited. I mean, because I think of this and saying, now you're getting into the space that Apple proved can offer incredible bang for the buck. And, you're coming in with, I mean, HX2 goes all the way up through 4K. So you're talking, things that have really high capability, with now the potential in even hardware to come out at much lower price points than people were used to seeing in the past. So
that may be the most important piece of this for the long term. I always look at, at NewTek, we have been pushing innovation for a while. Dr. Cross's team is very much always looking at both where the future is going and what is practical and easy to make things simple for people interacting with NDI. That's always been the NDI goal from day one, right? Don't memorize an IP address, plug 2 things in the network. We'll figure it out. We'll do the heavy lifting for you guys. Just choose the source that says PTZ camera, and you're good. Like, we'll manage that. The ARM piece of this is just it's subtle, but if you're thinking technologically, like, what does that mean for the next 3 years or longer of like NDI products that can be enabled is just so. I agree. It's just like it really
all of
has you
these
thinking about, like,
are ARM devices. So, when you open that up to combining where you are in mobile with, NDI now fully supporting ARM, to lower bandwidth HX being more mobile friendly, this whole combination of things goes to, it's not just having your little NDI camera. There's a lot more you can start to think about in this framework. So definitely exciting there.
That's the bet on the future. I think you continue to look at Viz Group and innovation, and you're saying, well, what are we doing? We've pushed IP since day one. We've pushed this crazy idea of, like, what if it was so easy that, like, a church volunteer could use NDI? Like, why does it have to be this complex and intense thing? I look at the successes of people in the field having worked with SRT, and I think, from an engineering perspective, SRT does amazing things. It's why when we made the newer systems, SRT is included in that. SRT does require a little bit of field engineering to get it working, and sort of we look at, like, NewTek and NDI and Viz Group are always going to be all encompassing. We want to work with all the different IP standards and still push everything on what NDI is doing. And that ARM stuff is, like, if you want to make a bet for the future, just look at the fact that we continue to push, not just, we talked about RUDP, right? Here's a new pathway. We're going over the network. So we have RUDP, MTCP, UDP with forward error correctioning, the TCP connections. Like, these are generations of NDI we've worked with. And then just looking at, like, oh, this is cool ARM stuff that Viz Group is doing and NDI stuff's doing. I wonder what that means. And the idea, I think, is always, like, we are never just saying we're content. NDI has never been content with just, like, where it's at. We're getting new users in. We're always iterating. that's so many more things in the future.
Yep.
Different third party partners, because now a whole new group of people working in ARM can work with NDI. And if you've been following NewTek before NDI's existence, you'll know that the number of people working with us has just exploded.
Yep.
We used to keep count of this stuff, and it's into the probably well over like so many thousands of different just people working with the SDK. Forget end users and stuff like that. So I look at that as like the bet for the future.
Oh yeah, I mean it was fun because we were in the first wave with neural net, and I remember it
Yes.
was you just had everybody's logo up on a wall at NAB, and it was like,
Yeah.
yeah, you could fit it. Now I there are probably thousands of real products out there that are part of this, so very cool there. So
Yeah.
there's a few things that were sort of the technical underpinnings too that were upgraded that I just wanted to touch on while people are here because I think it
Sure.
sort of gives people a sense of a lot of the things. So the private NDI network, NDI group setups where you can just not advertise them at all. That's
Right.
interesting, and we talked about the full support. There's additional GPU-based acceleration, which I'd be
Yep.
really excited about if you could get a GPU, but we're, we're, we're kind it is another one of those things where I'm sort of saying maybe just later this year we'll be in a position where we can start to really pack systems with the.
But but John, I gotta mine all my coins, man. I gotta get my cryptocurrency going.
I know.
I have to own 7 GPUs in a wood frame to. There's this is my point about also like the reality of some of this is like
Yep.
you gotta there's gonna be some customers, early adopters are gonna probably be able to set up a system to start taking advantage of all this stuff. And I think for a lot of other people, you now like, hey, the road's being built here.
Yep.
Now you can plan for 5 months, 6 months, where you're gonna get that new piece of tech and say, oh, maybe this thing that we were building, maybe it also does some bridge work for us.
But it's all coming back. I mean, so this is stuff. These are momentary blips in the technical trend line here. But the other thing was nick selection, and for a lot of people,
Yeah.
that is a really big deal. And I'll raise my hand on that one because we've done all sorts of things to force NDI on to advertise on just one network, and so that's really cool. But the other thing is IP-based genlock, which I don't think people necessarily appreciate, but there are incredibly expensive systems out there that sort of do remote camera genlock. And
Yeah.
having this ability now really is the other piece to if I'm doing sports and I have 4 different cameras at a venue, but I'm controlling them remotely because it's a remote production, I now can know those 4 cameras are coming back to me all in sync, as well as locally. But I mean, just having that type of framework when you think about the way productions are being organized today, and
Yeah.
who's
Yeah.
local, who's studio, you know, these types of things now are becoming really important, and it's good to see that it's not just the flashy stuff. There's a lot of product companies that just are this is sexy and it's cool, but this is the part that's like solving foundational issues that people are dealing with day in day out, that you don't
Right.
get any glitz for it. It's
No.
nothing that everybody's going to advertise, but it's like really important stuff.
No, we're not going to sell a million systems because we have this stuff in the background, but it's the magic that makes the reality happen. And I think for the propeller heads out there, the people who are in deep in the tech, you continue to see that stuff. You look at the iterations of NDI, you can sort of see like, oh, they did this little step didn't manifest in anything right away, but now it's coming back. Like these little iterations, and so something like the IP based gen like certainly is that you know today's, I say tomorrow, and I literally mean tomorrow's sports productions, as people are starting to get back outside, are largely going to be done with a remote operator because
Yep.
it's just going to make sense, deploying a small footprint. And now that we have this sort of stuff in the background, I think you're going to see some really cool stuff. I even as the 3P2 is nearing its release, and I think there's some cool workflows with that, and all things NDI that, to your point, not the craziest thing,
Yep.
but is important, and also is a for long-standing broadcast professionals. This is the kind of information that is going to be important as they look at the future of their facilities.
Yep.
Why are we getting involved with NDI? Well, look at all this stuff that it has built around it, and look at all of this stuff that is in the field. I think that's a big advantage that we have on the IP protocols. Like a lot of NDI stuff, you know, it's in the lab time. Once we get it out there, it's like everyone can start utilizing it, and you start to see that application immediately. Versus something that's sort of once we get it to that release point,
Yeah.
it is gone through its development cycles, and it is now available. Hey, use this thing.
But it's also, we're coming to the point where the processing power combined with the, I mean, NDI is much more flexible in terms of bit depth and other things than most people realize. And SDI is just bits, it's just a different wrapper. So as people
Yeah.
sort of move to the point where the infrastructure, the hardware infrastructure to support IP-based things catches up to, you know, the standard, the level people are looking. I mean, NDI is really, really good now. I mean, there may be the
Yeah.
pixel peepers who look and say, okay, I see this or I see that, but we'll get to the point where that won't be the issue. And then it becomes sort of like outside of sunk cost and sort of an infrastructure transition, the move to NDI and IP-based video is just going to become overwhelming, the pressure to move there because of the flexibility. So it's really cool seeing these two things we're starting to get to that point, which I think is going to be incredibly powerful.
As I've always said, we play with the stack deck here. We're at the table with everybody, but we're playing with the stack deck, knowing that like eventually you're coming around, and you're going to be working with
Yep.
NDI and some of our product stuff, because we're pushing so much on that stuff, and it is all practically and sensibly developed for what the applications are going to be. I think that is what I always hang my hat on when I'm going back and like, okay, what does this next development mean? It's like, well, NDI Bridge is our first foray into this like WAN based production workflow, and we're trying to make it as easy as possible. Do you have an NDI group?
Yep.
Push the button, and now that NDI group is available,
Yep.
And not having to get into some of the like the deeper minutia of all that. So literally, if you think about the poker analogy of like, hey, you can rig a deck in poker and say like everyone's playing along, they think everyone thinks that they're sort of maybe we're gonna go with this other pathway and make this other
Yep.
bet, but eventually the idea here is like we continue to make NDI awesome so that end users have an awesome experience, so that companies working with NewTek have an awesome experience, and just overall, I think looking towards the future, that bet becomes more and more solidified.
So I know your time is valuable, so I don't want to keep you too long, but we're just going to wrap to the post show, and people can normally just sort of post questions very quickly. So if you could hang around
Sure.
with us like for less than 10 more minutes, and
Sure.
we'll wrap this up. Okay, so everybody, I just want to say thanks for hanging in through our technical issues. We're going to bounce to the post show now. And having Chris here, if you have any questions you want to put up and ask, now's the time to do it. So if you can't stay, I'll see everybody next week, and we'll have another show together. But until then, see you in the post show. Take care. All right, we're back in the post show, and we have Chris Burgos still here with us. So thank you, Chris, for hanging around. But Kane has been jumping in. Somebody was asking, Otis Granville was asking, how much NDI can you put through a network pipeline before needing to move from 1 gigabit to 10 gigabit?
Oh man, it's going to be relative to the amount of like the resolution of the sources.
Yep.
Yeah, well, there you go. There's Kane's answer. Yeah, you're going to want multipath for some of this stuff.
Yeah, I
As
think
you
the other
sort of
thing,
roll up.
because I know people sometimes get confused about this, it's when you're dealing with gigabit networking, it's the point to point because it's a switch. So you have 1 gigabit to and from a device, so to and from. So that means that sort of in NDI terms, you're probably talking 6 or 7, you're probably talking 6 or 7 1080 NDI feeds in a 1 gigabit pipe. But that's to a device. So if you have feeds coming and going from lots of devices, it really is a much more complicated conversation and calculation. But what Kane posted is really a good thumbnail. But keep in mind that if it's not all going to one box, but if you're spreading the load across different boxes doing different things, you could conceivably have dozens and dozens of full bandwidth NDI feeds on a gigabit switch, just not all going to one port or coming from one port on that switch. So let's see, do we have any other questions here that people have been asking? So, all right. So I think we probably covered a lot, and I know that like I said, Chris, I really appreciate you making the time to jump on, especially with everything you have going on. So thank you so much for throwing a lot of light on some of the stuff we were talking about today. I just really appreciate it.
This is first of all, it's always a pleasure working with you guys. We've been doing this for a long time. Second, I think this is a really ambitious time. Looking at NDI 5 in the future, people are going to need more points of understanding and contact. And as this thing develops, it is like the complexities of what does this mean for me are always going to be in the minutia and things like that. So thank you guys for giving me the time to speak. It sometimes you think that this is corporate, but I always try to speak from the reality. It's like my home setup is an SDI-less setup. I'm using all NDI in my setup, but there's a lot of organizations where that's not their pathway. So there isn't always a general answer. The idea is we get you involved in there and NDI, and then we sort of take off. So thank you guys for the time to talk to the people at home.
Absolutely. Chris, thank you so much. I'll catch you later.
Right.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.